Akron will look to take a step closer to earning a second-ever conference championship if they can beat Kent State and win the MAC East on Tuesday night, while Toledo looks for their first conference title since 2004 if they defeat Western Michigan on Friday, and then, of course, win the MAC championship game, which would be coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll discuss the Mid-American Conference Championship picture, as well as the players to keep an eye on for the 2018 NFL Draft and beyond, as we go one-on-one with John Wagner, sports writer for the Toledo Blade, on the OFN Meeting Room with Greg DePalma. All right, thanks for tuning in to another edition of the OFN Meeting Room. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and it is a Monday, the 20th of November, 2017. So that means the clock is ticking as far as the conference championship races are concerned. And I know a lot of people out there, and look, reasonably so, are getting all psyched up for the big games coming up this weekend, including Alabama-Auburn, and how important it is for the big conference championship races and also the national championship. But as I've often said many times over the years on this network, and on Prime Sports Network, and now, of course, on the Our Football Radio Network, we understand that there are a lot of people, just as many people out there, that are really diehard fans for their own teams and their own conferences, and they don't necessarily make up the big Power 5 schools. And that's what we want to do here, and give them as much a say as those Power 5 schools, and sometimes even more so, just because there's not so much information out there for them to get. Everybody wants to talk about the big teams, and we will too, but we also want to talk about all the other teams that comprise the FBS, and that includes teams from the MAC. So the playoff picture is something that we'll talk more about this week, including, of course, our college football weekly preview, which, by the way, will be on Wednesday, not Friday, but Wednesday because of the holiday. But we're going to talk MAC football on this show because we might have a division winner tomorrow night. So let's introduce my guest to the program. And again, he covers, by the way, Bowling Green for the Toledo Blade, John Wagner. John, thanks for taking your time to talk to us today.
Greg, it's my pleasure, but I got to tell you, we got off on the wrong foot. I'm a Kent State grad from 100 years ago, and so when you open with the Akron fight song, man, oh day, that's fighting words. So I'll try and take deep breaths, but okay, let's go.
I figured I was going, I wonder if there's I said, I know there's not. I don't even know why I was looking for it, but maybe they should come up with like conference fight songs. I was like, I wonder if there's like such a thing. And I go, no, that's a waste of time.
Yeah, don't get me started on these fight songs. I've heard them for 100 years. Sometimes I have trouble falling asleep thinking about them.
So and I figured, hey, if I'm going to play one, I might as well play Akron, since they've only had one conference title in their history. They've only been to 2 bowl games, and they had a huge win last week. And that's what we want to start off with here, because Terry Bowden, look, that's a tough job at Akron, no question about it. But he took over a tough job. They had only won, 2 games in the 2 previous years he took over. The 1 win that he had his first year. So they had 3 wins in 3 years, including in his first year. But since then, 23-26. 4 years prior to coming into this season, and now all of a sudden they're sitting there at 6-5 after a nice little upset last week. And I'm not sure anybody realized that they actually had a chance that if they beat Ohio in that game last week, that they were going to have the destiny in their own hands.
Yeah, and that's a gigantic upset. You have to understand that the week before, Ohio University had manhandled the first-place team in the West, the University of Toledo, which was everybody's favorite to win the MAC championship, to compete for that spot in the playoffs. And that Toledo's only loss to that point had been to Miami, and I don't mean Miami of Ohio, I mean the Hurricane down in Florida, and they had stuck with Miami for a half. Now, it fell apart in the second half, but Toledo was an extremely highly regarded team, and Ohio had just demolished them the week before, and Akron demolished Ohio on TV last week. And here's the one other thing, Greg, that I want to say about that game. Akron was without its starting quarterback,
Yeah.
Thomas Woodson, a senior, who's been suspended the last 2 games. They used a redshirt freshman by the name of Cato Nelson, who threw for more than 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against an Ohio team that had stonewalled Toledo the week before. I mean, after that game, you could have knocked me over with a feather. What a gigantic win for Akron.
Yeah, no, I mentioned that Nelson performance on the show last week because that came from absolutely nowhere. But this is why I see this happening a lot in both college and pro football. It's the whole reason why when I see certain quarterbacks or certain positions, but we always, of course, want to talk about the big quarterback position. When a quarterback is struggling and you're dying for can you show me I mean, is there a backup there somewhere that can actually can you give him a half? Can we see if somebody's better? And then it takes an injury, a suspension. Look at Khalil Tate. I mean, and here he comes out of nowhere, and then you're like, why didn't you play these guys earlier? Why didn't you give him a shot? And I guess we see this happen all the time, and sometimes players just don't show it in practice.
No doubt. And I mean, Nelson came up with a huge game when Akron needed it. There have been other teams in the MAC that have done the same thing. Northern Illinois is in the hunt for the title. I mean, they need some help in the West, but they had a freshman quarterback by the name of Marcus Childers step up. And the Bowling Green team that I cover, they struggled early on. Now, some of that was a tough schedule. They played Michigan State and Northwestern and people like that. But they had a freshman by the name of Jared Dagey step up and has solidified their play at quarterback and made them a viable team on offense.
All right, so Akron now. But by the way, what is the quarterback situation going into the game tomorrow for Akron? Do we know? Is he going back to the veteran?
You know, they've kept that under wraps. Woodson's been suspended for 2 games now.
Oh, okay.
A loss at Miami that really seemed to have doomed them.
Yes.
And then the huge win at Ohio that has them in contention.
Okay.
As it stands right now, it's still Cato Nelson, and you know, based on the way he played, it's kind of hard to argue.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, if they win and beat Kent State, which we would assume is going to happen, but you never know. I mean, the pressure's on now. But Kent State has just not been one of the top, anywhere near one of the top programs in this conference for a while. So Akron, and I believe, what are they? They're already. I thought they would probably even be more than a 15-point favorite, to tell you the truth. So we would expect Akron to win that game. If something crazy happens, then that does open the door for Ohio, who plays at Buffalo on Friday. And Buffalo, by the way, that's a big game for Buffalo because they need the game for bowl eligibility.
You just nailed it. Now, the one thing I would caution you, and again, full disclosure, Kent State grads you're talking to, that is a big-time rivalry game. You know, it's not Ohio State, Michigan, or Alabama, Auburn, or all of those, but for those 2 programs, that's their arch rival. A lot of times you just throw the records out.
Okay.
You know you're going to get Kent's best game there. And also, they have a situation where their coach, Paul Haynes, is probably in a little trouble because of their lack of success in recent seasons.
Yep.
So that you know that those kids are going to play hard for their coach. But yeah, you're talking about Buffalo. They have really come on. Tyree Jackson's their quarterback. He got healthy, and not coincidentally, they started having a lot of success. And they have a kid to watch, a wide receiver by the name of Anthony Johnson, leads the league in receptions, already has 1,200 yards receiving, and that's an impressive number. But when you remember that he's had 3 different quarterbacks throw to him this year because of injuries, I think that makes that a tremendously impressive number. So Ohio does not have a walkover against Buffalo.
Okay. But yes, Anthony Johnson is definitely somebody. I mean, I've seen him a few times this year make some have some really big games. And as you said, I mean, look, 70 receptions and over 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns. So he's only a junior. Interesting to see what happens there. But you would think he comes back next year for his senior season. Jackson's a junior. And look, even Drew Anderson played well for them when Jackson went down. It was when Anderson went down, then all of a sudden they started to panic a little bit about what was going on there. But Lance Leopold looks like he's the type of guy that might be able to get a pretty good, he might be able to do a pretty good job there.
Yeah, he's in his 3rd year there, and that's the point where I think you need to start seeing progress after 3 years. You're starting to get your recruits populated. you've stacked a few recruiting classes together, and so you need to see movement, and they have.
And they also have a kid, we all know about Khalil Mack, but they've got another linebacker, Khalil Hodge. And Hodge is just destroying the Mac in tackles with 141 tackles. Now, he's not the Mac prospect, so we get that. But still, I mean, he's a little under the radar type of player. Maybe we should be keeping an eye on. He's only a junior, so maybe he comes back again next season. And then who knows? Maybe next season he's somebody that we need to keep an eye on for at some point in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I think so, but I think you also made a good point. Khalil Mack was a game disruptor. I mean, he was all over the field, tackles for loss, interceptions, fumbles. I mean, he just did everything. And I know we're going to talk more about this as we go along. There are guys like that who are going to be eligible for the NFL draft, and I know we'll hit on that later, but that'll be our little teaser to stick around, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we can actually head back to head over to Toledo because, again, Toledo is going to be Akron's opponent if Akron wins, and then Toledo wins on Friday. Now, Toledo would have to win because if they don't, then that opens the door for Northern Illinois, correct?
It is, but it's also a little trickier than that because Toledo is going to be facing a Western Michigan team that's 4-3, but just 1 year removed from that dramatic season from a year ago, and they have a ton of talent, and so that is going to be anything but a walkover for UT. Northern also has a very tough game. They play Central Michigan, and Central Michigan has been very strong this year. They're a 7-win team. You're going to see them in a bowl game at some point this bowl season, and so both of those teams have losable games for them.
Yeah, so Toledo beat Northern Illinois at home a few weeks back, so that's why they've got the tiebreaker. So they can get in, I guess, two different ways then. So they win or if they both lose, correct?
Right.
Okay.
You just nailed it exactly. They're both 6-1 in the league.
All right. Now, starting with Toledo, Logan Woodside has got to be one of the conference's top prospects. Matter of fact, I believe he is the 12th rated senior quarterback prospect right now for our lads. He's number one in the MAC as far as quarterback, over 3,000 yards passing. 65% of his passes have been completed, and an astounding 22-2 touchdown to interception ratio. So you got Logan Woodside. You've also got Terry Swanson, who's number 2 in the MAC, over 1,000 yards rushing and 11 touchdowns. Swanson is the 20th ranked senior linebacker right now at our lads. And then you also have Cody Thompson, who was at one point the 11th rated senior wide receiver. He's injured, of course, and out for the season, so that's a big blow. Start with those guys.
Well, let's start with Woodside. And you hit the magic number there. The 22 touchdowns leads the MAC, it's one behind Shane Morris of Central for the MAC lead. Still a ton in 11 games. It's 2 touchdowns a game. But just 2 interceptions. He had 316 passes thrown. That's just ridiculous efficiency. And it was something, in fact, that Jason Campbell mentioned after Toledo just tarnished Bowling Green last Wednesday, crushed them, 42 points in the second half. The kicker was they had 637 yards of total offense, and everyone, including me, thought that Toledo would throw, and just overthrow Bowling Green, and they didn't. They actually had 389 yards rushing.
Yeah.
Terry Swanson had almost 200 yards in the game, and they averaged 7 yards a rushing attempt. And Jason Campbell, after the game, said, give a lot of credit to that for Logan Woodside for 2 reasons. One, he would make the checks at the line to get them in the right running play, and man, they ran a lot of right running plays. But the second is, when you're a guy like Logan Woodside, Jason said, you want to throw the ball. You're a quarterback who's efficient. You want to take those plays, and he didn't. He saw that BG was giving Toledo the run and stayed with it and helped his team score 66 points.
Now, you've seen Woodside play over his career. How do you compare him to other MAC quarterbacks? Because this is definitely, this is a conference that has produced some pretty fine quarterback talent that we've seen in the pros. So How do you compare? What kind of a career do you think you could have at the next level?
I like his accuracy. That's really, he can fit balls into tight windows
Okay.
and can spin it. So I also like the headiness. He's not a guy who's going to make mistakes. He's not a guy who, with a pass rush in his face, is going to burn you with a bad throw or a pick or whatever. And I think those things are incredibly valuable at the next level. I mean, they're everything in the NFL.
Yes.
So he's a guy who is deserving of a chance and is going to get a chance.
All right. And Swanson. Now, Swanson is not Kareem Hunt. But Swanson is having a great career. It's his turn to come out, and we'll see exactly what kind of a career he could have at the next level. But what do you think about Swanson and some of the other running backs that you've seen go pro from the MAC over the last several years?
I'm glad you said he's not Kareem Hunt, because guys like that don't grow on trees. Now, having said that, we're going to talk to, I'm sure in a little bit, about a guy who's nearly Kareem Hunt. So another teaser alert there.
Yep.
Swanson has been terrific, though, and he was in Kareem Hunt's shadow for several years. I mentioned that he had almost 200 yards against Bowling Green. He, by the way, was playing on an injured ankle. He wasn't even 100%. Falcon fans were frightened when they heard that. It's like, holy mackerel, what had happened if he had been 100%? But he has been really strong, and the MAC has done a nice job in recent years producing running backs of the ilk of Kareem Hunt, and Terry Swanson's not that, but he's close.
Okay. And then now Thompson's been out for the year for a while. He's the top. Now, they got some good receivers, and Deontay Johnson's going to be a good one as well. But as a matter of fact, Deontay Johnson, only a sophomore, has 58 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns. So he's been the number one guy with Cody Thompson out. What have you seen in Thompson, whether this year or last year? Pretty good size. Even last year, over 1,200 yards receiving, and almost about a 20-yard per catch average, which is pretty good. So, what do you think about Thompson?
Tremendous athlete, tremendously hard worker. He's been hurt almost all year. My understanding is he's going to come back and apply for that red shirt and come back and reestablish value with Toledo next year.
Cool.
That's my understanding, and obviously we're going to have to see how that plays out. But I mean, he is such a hard worker that if somebody's betting against him, that's a fool's bet. I mean, that's a kid who's going to do whatever it takes to come back, be 100%, be ready to go. So Cody Thompson's not a guy to ever bet against. And it was funny, you mentioned Deontay Johnson of Toledo. The MAC is Johnson heavy because obviously we have Anthony Johnson, and Toledo has two Johnsons who are receivers. The other is John Vay Johnson, and they are a handful. They are a handful.
All right. Now, their opponent, Western Michigan, on Friday, the first year with Tim Lester there, PJ Flex over in Minnesota. So we knew that they were going to have a little bit of a drop down this year. Of course, they lost some talent, their coach, their quarterback, and such, and of course a big time receiver. But you mentioned that tease, and I've been intrigued by this Jarvion Franklin kid since he first entered the MAC as a freshman, because he comes in and he has a tremendous start to his career. MAC, Offensive Player of the Year, Freshman Player of the Year, and he figured, okay, this guy's going to be a beast. And then all of a sudden, Bogan starts to take carries away from him, and I was like, I don't understand. Carries away from this guy? Well, this Bogan kid must be something special. But now Bogan's hurt, and so Franklin's the guy again. He's leading the conference in yards, 1176 with 11 touchdowns. He's the 13th rated senior running back on the RLED's board. So how do you compare Franklin to, say, a Hunt or any other running backs that you've seen come out of the MAC?
Well, the Franklin story does deserve an asterisk because he was hurt that sophomore year when Jamari Bogan came in. Okay. So it was kind of he wasn't 100%. Bogan was ready to go, and so you just plug one in for the other. And that's, In fact, if I can do a quick aside here, that's why I always laugh when people go or say I'm not going to go to a school. They already have such and such a back. It's like, you can never have enough at any position, even quarterback. At some point, you're going to play. If you're good enough, you're going to play. And that was the situation with Bogan, with Jarvian Franklin. Franklin is a bigger player than Kareem Hunt. He's more of a between the tackles kind of guy. If he's got to mow you down, he'll mow you down. And that plays against bigger schools as well. That's not just he's mowing MAC linebackers down. In the Big Ten, not so much. No, he can do that against all comers. So he's just not as elusive as Kareem Hunt, and he's not as quick as Kareem Hunt. But again, you got to remember that we've set the bar incredibly high when you're comparing it to Kareem Hunt. That would be like saying, "Oh, I'm not as quick as Kareem Hunt." Well, duh. Yeah. And he's also really, really quick. So Franklin is a legitimate NFL prospect.
All right. Also, the top prospects for Western Michigan, they've got. I think he is the top rated as far as by position at our lads. Senior prospect is their offensive tackle.
Come on, what's his name?
All right, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for Okorafor.
Okorafor. That's a nice effort, though.
All right, Okorafor. I got it.
He's an amazing talent. He's very athletic, and he was born in Africa, came to the United States, played a lot of soccer. So that's why his foot skills are so highly developed.
Big guy.
He's very, very talented foot skills, and that obviously plays well when it comes to being an offensive lineman. Plus, he's 300-plus pounds. Yeah. He is the real deal. Chukwuma Okorafor. I guarantee you're going to hear that name in the first round of this year's NFL draft.
All right. Well, look, if he's got the footwork for a guy that might be 330 pounds and stand at about 6'6", I believe so. He's the number 2 rated offensive tackle senior prospect, so we could definitely see him, as you said, as a first-round draft pick out of Western Michigan. Then the other couple of players to keep an eye on are top 20 senior defensive backs. Darius Phillips, who's got 13 pass defense this year, 3 interceptions and a pick 6, and Asante Brown, who is also in that defensive backfield safety for Western Michigan. You've been able to see these guys play. What do you think about those guys?
Yeah, and in particular, I want to talk about Darius Phillips, because if people would have talked to me last year, I would have won your NFL fantasy by telling you to pick up Kareem Hunt. I'm going to help your listeners win next year. Pick Darius Phillips, okay? He's really good as a defensive back, very talented, but he's a ridiculous talent as a return man. He had a 100-yard kickoff return against USC. He's practically impossible to stop if you give him even the tiniest seam on a return, kickoff or punt return. I mean, he's unbelievably dangerous in that part of the game. And that's what makes Western Michigan such a dangerous team, because, you could slow down their offense. You could try and slow down Franklin or whatnot. But the moment you put a foot to the ball and it lands in Darius Phillips' hands, you have a real chance at trouble. He's ridiculously good. He is an all-American caliber kickoff and punt returner.
All right, over to Northern Illinois, and I don't see any. I think what it looks like that Northern Illinois, their top players might be their sophomores and their freshmen. Matter of fact, you mentioned already the freshman quarterback Marcus Childers, who actually made his first start against your alma mater, right? Against Kent State. So
and has done a really nice job of just stabilizing that position. I mean, he's got decent numbers, 130 passing yards a game. But what Marcus Childers has done is he's not turned the ball over. He's got 14 touchdowns. He only has 3 interceptions thrown. Now, he only has 200 attempts, whereas Woodside has over 300. But still, he has limited the turnovers, and that has really allowed Northern to not lose games. But they win them with their defense. And they've got 2 guys that I want to point out on defense. One is a defensive back by the name of Sean Lurie. He's a former All-American. He's not having that caliber of a season, but he's a dangerous guy. I believe his pick six this year came against a team named Nebraska.
All right.
Which
I
get
remember that game.
Nebraska's not Nebraska.
Sure.
But it's still a Big Ten team that Northern beat on their home field. So you got to give props for that. The guy to watch, though, on their defensive line is a guy by the name of Sutton Smith. He ranks among the national leaders in tackles for loss. In fact, I believe he's number one in sacks. He already has 15 in 11 games, and he may be a little undersized as a rush end, but you just can't stop him. You just can't stop him, and that was the kind of pressure that Northern put on Nebraska that led to 2 pick sixes and a big upset win over the Cornhuskers.
All right, and Smith is a sophomore, so we'll be seeing more of him down the road. Central Michigan, who will be hosting Northern Illinois on Friday, and Corey Willis is one of their top prospects. So he is top 25 senior wide receiver prospect for our lads. He had the injury earlier this year, which really kind of hurt Central Michigan's momentum at one point. And I know that they also have that tight end Tyler Conklin, who dealt with the injury and did not play until a few games into the season. So you had Tyler Conklin, but Corey Willis was the top prospect out of the two. And then on defense, they've got Joe Osman.
And Osman is a guy who's missed the last couple of games, but he's also a prospect because he's another one of those guys who can get to the passer, even if you've set up your defense to try and stop him. Now, he missed a couple games in recent weeks.
Okay.
He actually, I believe, came back for their last game, but he is a dangerous guy on the rush as well. I mean, he's got 11 sacks in 9 games. So it's been amazing this year. The MAC has been blessed with a lot of guys who can get to the passer, and I think they're guys that even if they don't necessarily get drafted by an NFL team, they're going to be signed as free agents and given a long, hard look just because of their ability to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, we've certainly seen a lot of free agents over the years, especially with all this infusion of underclass, juniors come out and so forth. And with all of that, we've seen a lot of quality players that they don't get drafted and they wind up having some pretty good careers. So no question that there'll be a bunch of those that might fit the bill from the MAC. Eastern Michigan, Chris Creighton seems like he's doing a very good job. I don't think any team in college football had more close losses this year than the Eagles. They're going to end their season against Bowling Green. Is there any chance at all for an Eastern Michigan or any other team in this conference to go bowling without a 6 win?
I would say it's going to be tough. You have the academic requirement that's going to be factored in. The other end of it is a lot of times bowls are pushing for the name schools, and that's going to be a Power 5 school. So the MAC, it looks like, is going to have 6, I believe, bowl eligible teams. They're hoping for Buffalo to be a 7th, and that is probably going to be where the limit is. But you mentioned Chris Creighton at Eastern Michigan.
Yes.
Your listeners probably don't understand what a fantastic job he's done at Eastern. I mean, Eastern's program has been downtrodden for so long, and by downtrodden, I mean the bottom of the barrel. I mean, last year they were 7-6 after losing their bowl game. They played in the Bahamas Bowl, so they had a 7-5 season. That was the first time that their program had more wins than losses since 1995.
Yeah.
And they got a bowl bid for the first time since 1987.
Yep.
And I mean, not only have they been bad, there were 2-10s, 1-11s, winless seasons.
Yep.
I mean,
every year.
They had been the bottom of the barrel. So for him to get that program, it's 7-6. I know it would get some coaches fired. I know PJ Fleck had a great year last year. I got to be honest. I voted for Chris Creighton for MAC Coach of the Year last year.
Good for
because
you.
That was a ridiculous ridiculous job that he did with that program.
Well, just so you know, and I'm pretty proud of it, is that my particular listeners definitely, if they're long listeners, they know how much I have given Chris Creighton airtime. Maybe recent listeners, because we haven't talked a lot about them in the past 4 or 5 weeks since they haven't been up to par.
Sure. Yeah.
But I love these stories, and what he did last year, man. I kept talking. I mean, I was talking more about Eastern Michigan and maybe the run from Miami of Ohio last year than just about any other teams in college football, because I just love that kind of those stories in college football. As I said at the Open, everybody wants to talk all the time. I mean, do we really have to talk about the same stuff every single show about every top Power 5 school and never give the recognitions to the Chris Creightons of the world?
Sure. And and it's kind of funny. We are in a what have you done for us lately kind of just sports milieu, I guess. And it's funny, Toledo, to go back to the top of the conference for just a second, they've been really successful year after year after year. But it's interesting, they've not been at the top of the mountain for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, they've always been in contention
Mm-hmm.
for the MAC championship game, but they haven't played in it since 2004. That's just, they've had way too much talent and way too much success to have that long of a drought in the MAC championship game. So that, it just tells you college football is a really fragile thing, especially when you only have 12 games. I mean, one or two games, the car can go off the road. Baseball, that's a 2-game losing streak. Let's play tomorrow.
Yeah.
And basketball, same way. Hockey, same way. Football, 2 losses, that can derail your season. So, big props for Toledo to get to this point. And like I said, big props to Chris Creighton for the job he's done in reviving that program at Eastern Michigan.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, look, if we get a Toledo-Akron championship game, then you've got 2 teams that have not won. Akron 2005, Toledo since 2005, and Toledo since 2004. So that would be a nice story there for both teams. By the way, with Matt Campbell, what's your gut instinct tell you about whether or not he'll hang around long enough at Iowa State to see them actually maybe even play in a Big 12 championship game one of these years?
It's funny you say that. There's 2 things. One, people at Toledo were shocked when he took the job at Iowa State. And his explanation was, to the folks in Iowa State, was that was a job that he had on his list. Toledo had played Iowa State a few years back, and he said that when he came back from that game, he told his wife, hey, I could see us moving to Ames, Iowa. Oh. I could see me taking that job. So he saw things in that job that the rest of us did not see. The other thing is, when you talk contract, the contract that he has at Iowa State is going to be incredibly punitive to a team that wants to buy him out.
Okay.
And good or bad, I mean, judge that as you wish.
Sure.
Somebody's going to have to pay a ton of money to get him out of that job. He's not going to be going to anybody but la creme de la creme. Somebody like a Florida that has wads of cash that they can make that kind of a big deal. It's not, he's not going to go to the 3rd place team in a Power 5 conference. It's going to be to one of the monster schools if they can put the money together to do it.
All right. Sounds look, I've often said for years, I think that is a sleeping I wouldn't say giant, but a sleeping contender because of what I see with the basketball program. They love their basketball program. They got a lot of winning there. So if the basketball program can win as much as they can. See, I kind of feel like the same thing with Kansas, but it's just up to the athletic director. It's up to hiring the right coach and having that coach stay there long enough to build something. And that's what I'd like to see happen. So hopefully he could stay there and build something, because there's no reason for me to believe that he couldn't build something there similar to what we've seen from Snyder at Kansas State, where they could be competitive every year, go to some championship games, and so forth, but only if he stays. That's the trick. He's got to stay long enough where they've already got some winning established, and then if he leaves the program, he leaves it in really good hands.
Yeah, and the other thing here, you make a good point. The expectations have to be realistic. If an Iowa State is looking for a coach that's going to stay there 20 years and be a perennial national title contender,
Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to happen
Yeah.
at Iowa State. Now, let's be realistic.
Sure.
But if it's we're going to have competitive teams every year, we're going to fight for championships when the time is right, and we're going to be successful, and we're going to go to bowl games, that's a realistic expectation. That makes Iowa State a much more than palatable job, just a more desirable job. The expectations are realistic, and if they give them the wherewithal to meet those expectations, a good coach like a Matt Campbell can do it.
All right. Ball State, they've had their share of key injuries to their top quarterback, Riley Neal, their top running back, James Gilbert. But they do have their top prospect, even though right now I don't see him anywhere high or anywhere near high as far as draft boards. Maybe this is one of these guys that gets drafted in the middle to late rounds. I don't know, maybe even a priority free agent, but somebody that you'd want to keep an eye on is Anthony Wimbush.
I totally agree with that. I'm glad you brought his name up because it's easy for teams that are struggling like Ball State is. They're 2-9. They've lost 8 in a row, I believe, and they're getting squashed on a weekly basis. And by the way, they're on their 4th quarterback, I believe it is. So they have a true freshman that I saw the last time I watched them play. But guys like an Anthony Wimbush who keep playing hard and keep doing things, they're productive. And especially on a bad team, a guy who's productive stands out like a sore thumb because the coach on the other side says, hey, we might want to put a hat on this Wimbush guy, okay? Maybe even 2 hats if we can afford it. And if he's still making plays, that's got to account for something. Yeah, Wimbush may not be drafted, but I think that would be a sneaky free agent signing for an NFL team.
Yeah, he's got 12 sacks and 15.5 tackles for loss with 5 forced fumbles this season. Their top players look like they are both kids, both freshmen. Running back Caleb Huntley, who's done a really nice job in for Gilbert, their junior running back, and Justin Hall, who leads the MAC with receptions with 73.
Yeah, at this time of year with the teams that are struggling, like they or Kent State or Bowling Green or whatever team you want to mention, it's interesting to see who's playing hard. And I give Mike New a lot of credit at Ball State. His kids are still playing hard. I mean, a couple weeks ago, they came in and their 3rd quarterback got hurt on the 2nd or 3rd series, so they went to a true freshman. So, not only do they have a true freshman in at quarterback, it's a guy who wasn't getting the reps. And they still were playing hard, and for a time, they held with Toledo. Now, Toledo, just like they did to BG, they totally obliterated Ball State in the second half. But you got to like when a team that's down is still giving you some fight. And it's great to look at the film and say, okay, this is a guy who's going to play hard. We can build on him. This is a kid that quit. We know not to build on him. And
sure.
they have a lot of kids that haven't quit.
Ohio, it looks like unless Akron gets upset, Ohio is not going to represent the MAC in the championship when everybody thought they were. Of course, Nathan Rourke, the sophomore Canadian quarterback, had a lot to do with that. He's got 19 rushing touchdowns this year, so that really bodes well for the program over the next couple of years. And they also have, I would guess maybe their top prospect could be cornerback Brad Ellis. He's got 20 pass defense this year. I mean, he's just smoking the conference in PDs.
Yeah, and with Rourke, Frank Solich is the coach there, and I know Nebraska fans recognize that name. He has really gotten back to his running roots with Rourke running a speed option and being tremendously successful at that. I mean, he's thrown for 14 touchdowns, but he's run for 19, which the last time I checked, that was most amongst quarterbacks in the FBS level. And he's a handful to stop on the run. Now, defensively, the guy that I like, and it's a guy who's going to be a competitor for MAC Player of the Year's defensively rather, is their linebacker, Quentin Poling.
Okay.
Makes a ton of plays all over the field. Just a hard-nosed kid, and he's a guy. I mean, tackles are one indicator, but another is doing other things, forcing fumbles and breaking up passes and things like that. And he's a guy who's all over the field making big plays for them.
All right, and he is a senior, so he will be coming out. Moving on to Akron. They have a nice little under-the-radar linebacker as well. And Ulysses Gilbert, he's only a junior, but he's got 103 tackles and 4 sacks on the season. So he's probably got. I mean, he's probably up there. Would he be one of the top guys to keep an eye on?
He would be the guy for the Akron defense for sure. I mean, it's a guy who also has got some sacks and has done some things, and he's the guy when Akron needs a big play made. Ulysses Gilbert is the guy that they're expecting to make that play. They funnel a lot of run plays and run fits to him to make the stop, and obviously if he's got over 100 tackles, he's the guy who's doing it.
Any reason to believe that Terry Bowden, by the way, won't just continue coaching there for several more years?
You know, that's an interesting one, because it's been interesting to watch when bowl bids come out. Some of these Southern bowls, they adore having Akron come in because it's a Terry Bowden opportunity.
Yeah,
I know
sure.
the folks in the Camellia Bowl are very interested. I would expect that the folks in Mobile, Alabama, and I'm brain locked on that. It used to be the GoDaddy Bowl. It's the Dollar General Bowl, I believe.
Okay.
The bowl in Mobile, Alabama, nice,
That's
good
okay.
bowl, good people.
Yeah.
They also, would be excited to have Terry Bowden come there. He creates some buzz from his time at Auburn, and I remember his dad vaguely had some success. I'm brain locked on where that. Is it Bobby Bowden? Was that his name?
Yeah, I think that's his name. Yeah.
It rings a bell at least. So yeah, but I mean, my point is that is a name that resonates with the Bulls and with fans who are going to buy tickets to watch Bulls.
Yeah, and of course, when his brother was at Clemson, I think a lot of people, when he left, the Clemson program they're in trouble. Not so much.
That Sweetie individual's done a nice job there, I would
Not
say.
so
in
much.
Today's understatement of the day.
Yes. Chuck Martin has done a really nice job at Miami. Things weren't going well there for a while, and even in this first few years, they had some struggles, but they improved the wins each year. After 0-6 last year, that was the big story. That's what I just loved following them with their 6 straight wins and almost beating Mississippi State in the bowl game. So there was a lot of expectations for them this year, but Ragland has been injured most of the season, and he's a big part of their offense at quarterback.
Oh, he's just a gigantic part of what they do. And in fact, that's the reason that they've kind of stumbled and stubbed their toe the past few weeks. He got hurt in the game at Bowling Green, and you could see their offense take a dip, and it allowed BG to come back and win. And then he did not come back very quickly, and that is kind of what doomed them to the position that they're at in the middle of the pack in the East. If nothing else, it shows us the importance of having a good quarterback and having a guy who, even if he's not throwing for crazy touchdowns like a Logan Woodside is, even if he's just managing a game, not turning the ball over, keeping you in the right plays, and just giving your team a chance to win instead of losing the game for you. Ragland, it was a gigantic loss when he was lost for Miami.
And they have a couple of really good junior running backs there in Alonzo Smith and Kenny Young. They also have a nice junior receiver in James Gardner. I think their top prospect, though, is their tight end, and the 7th-ranked senior tight end prospect for our lads, and Ryan Smith. And then maybe their defender, cornerback, Heath Harding, is somebody to keep an eye on as well.
Harding is a guy that I would keep an eye on for sure. I mean, he came into this season very highly regarded. His numbers are down a little bit because people are saying, I don't think this is a very good idea to throw at Heath Harding. Let's throw at someone else.
Sure.
And no matter who that someone else is, they're not Heath Harding. He is a guy that definitely deserves the accolades that he's got. Very, very talented guy.
All right, now Bowling Green, this is your team, the team that you cover, and they've had some struggles since Babers has left. So what do you think? I mean, first of all, is Jink's job okay? I mean, I know it's tough to follow a guy like Babers and not to win. Because boy, this team is also the program is going to come through so many changes. I remember when they were the best defensive team in the MAC, and then Babers came along and the offensive came along and they were the best offense in the MAC. But that's what happens from coach to coach. What do you think is going on with the program right now?
Well, yeah, that you've just nailed the problem there. And make sure you give a lot of credit also to Dave Clawson,
yes,
who was the guy who built the program up, won a MAC title in 2015, won the MAC championship game, upsetting Northern Illinois and the team that was going to go to one of the big championship games, and they upset them and spanked them at Ford Field in Detroit. That got Dave
and he's
Clawson
doing a great job at Wake Forest. He's doing a great job
and
there.
They are bowl eligible for the second year in a row, and they've been rolling the quad more and more each week. So that lots of credit to him. Dino Babers just took a great collection of talent to another level in his time there. I mean, I can't say enough about Matt Johnson, their quarterback. They had a running back by the name of Travis Green, who's BG's all-time best in terms of yardage. If you watch the New York Giants, Roger Lewis, a wide receiver from Bowling Green, he was on that team. A guy who's on the reserve squad at Kansas City, Garrick Dieter, was on that team. I mean, tons of talent, and Dino Babers molded into just a juggernaut team, a really strong team. Unfortunately, that was 2015, and in 2 years' time, only 3 starters from that 15 team are still in BG. So it's been a bit of a rebuild for Mike Jinks. He's not in trouble yet, but there is very much unhappiness from a fan base that has saw the BG team go to the MAC championship game 3 years in a row. So they're not. And go to bowl games 4 years in a row, I believe. So they're not happy to have losing records and staying home in December. Sure. Now the good news for Mike is that there is some young talent coming along, and if I can real quick, just 2 quick names to watch. One is their quarterback, Jarrett Dagey. And if you're a Texas Tech fan, you probably remember that name because of Seth Dagey, his brother.
Yeah.
Seth is on the staff at BG. Jarrett has been hurt. They wanted to redshirt him this year, but problems at quarterback thrust him into the spotlight, and he has shown. He's been really good and has given this program some hope for the future. I mean, he's a game manager. But also a guy who's not afraid to take a hit and make a play. He's got 10 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions.
Okay.
Now that's only in 150 attempts, but still, those are good numbers, and that's despite being sacked way, way too many times. The other guy to watch as a true freshman, and these guys are both true freshmen.
Yeah.
They literally are just on campus. Andrew Clare, the running back, is the other. He is amongst the MAC leaders in rushing, has almost 700 yards. He's only played in 10 games, and he's a guy who can make people miss, not only in space, but even in tight spaces. It's just amazing. The number of times that the first hitter has tackled him, I probably could do it on one hand and have fingers left over. And he's just been amazing. If Childers, the quarterback at Northern, wasn't a freshman, I would say Andrew Clare would be your MAC freshman of the year. He's been that good.
Okay. All right. And by the way, Scott Miller, is he the best player on the team right now, the receiver, the junior receiver?
Scotty has been terrific, and the thing is that he's not gotten up until the last few weeks when Tio Redding, who has just been a human highlight film. Tio Redding, 7 touchdown passes, every one of them has been spectacular, it feels like. So he has really come on to give them a bit of a 1-2 punch, but Scotty Miller if he's got a step on you, you're done. And I don't care if you're Usain Bolt, rather. He's going to give you, he's got you beat. He's that quick. And 55 catches this year, more than 600 yards receiving. He's a very dangerous receiver, and he gives Daggy a good target.
All right, and then we take a look at Buffalo and Kent State, and we'd already talked, of course, about Anthony Johnson and Hodge for Buffalo, and their situation. Again, they got to beat Ohio on Friday for bowl eligibility, and Kent State. They had something going when Holly was playing quarterback there last year, but that was it. It seemed like that was the only time that there was life with the program was when Holly started to play some quarterback, but he's been banged up and injured, and things just haven't gone well for this program. I gotta be honest with you. I'm gonna be surprised if Paul Haynes comes back. That's just me.
I wouldn't argue with you, and unfortunately, I know Paul from his time as a student athlete there, and a good guy, an honorable guy, just stand-up guy. You love having me as your coach, but wins are wins and losses are losses. And yes, losing Nick Holly really it sucked the life out of that program for two reasons. One, just because it's a senior quarterback who may not be throwing a lot of passes. He was more of a run-first kind of guy. But the bigger thing was he was in a leader position with that team, captain, guy everybody looked to. When times get tough, Nick is going to be the guy who shepherds us through. And when he went down, that's a huge void. And it was impossible for Kent State to fill that void.
All right. So that is going to wrap it up. So I guess you're going to give me your predictions. Are we going to see Akron take on Toledo?
Yeah, I would say you're going to have – that's how it's going to be. But, it's not a walk for Toledo. That's not automatic. If you can watch that game on Friday, if you get your Black Friday shopping done really early so you can catch that action, that will be a surprisingly close game in my opinion. But Toledo playing at home with so much on the line, with everything they want being so close, I think they pull that out. And with the wagon wheel on the line tomorrow, I think Kent State will give it a push, but I think Akron, especially with the way that Cato Nelson played last week at quarterback, it solves so many problems for Akron. I can't see them stubbing their toe here.
All right, John, before I let you go, how is this? Is this better? Let me see here. I can get this. Is that better, John?
That's way better. That brings back some memories. Attaboy.
All right.
That's a beautiful finish. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I look forward to talking to you before maybe the MAC championship game.
That sounds like a plan. Sounds great.
Thanks, John. All right, that's John Wagner, and that'll do it here for the OFN Meeting Room on the Our Football Radio Network. Again, John covers the MAC football for the Toledo Blade. So we'll see you again next couple of days with more interviews. So we're looking forward to that. And when we return, I think we've got ourselves, what do we got? I think tomorrow, Conference USA Talk at 2 o'clock. But we have Jets Confidential Radio at 5, the Arlett's Football Radio Network at 6. And if you're NASCAR fans, we'll be talking NASCAR in a few minutes on the Prime Sports Radio Network. But again, it was great having John Wagner on the program. And we're going to talk to John again when we talk MAC football for the MAC championship game coming up a little bit, I guess maybe as early as next week. So thanks for tuning in to the All Lads Football Radio Network, and we'll see you next time.